kind words of introduction. Let me begin by thanking the organizers of the seminar, particularly General De Silva, for inviting me to this wonderful forum to participate. And I think it's been a great morning so far. And we have already, the keynote speaker is already laid out the key themes of the seminar. I have been asked to speak on global security environment and how Asia fits into this. I will take a structured view to this, and I would like to basically talk a little bit about the factors. I've picked up about 5 factors which affect the global security environment, and I've tried to relate this to how they impact on Asia. And then I'll say a little bit about our relations with Sri Lanka, and I'll conclude with a few remarks. Now, the contemporary global security scenario is characterized by diffusion of power and rearrangement of power globally. The world is increasingly becoming multipolar. So we accept that. Similarly, Asia is also witnessing turbulent times, dynamic times, as well as we see instability in several parts of Asia, even as the threat of terrorism is continuing to grow. Asia is the largest and most populous continent and is home to several emerging and established powers. Asian security environment is closely linked with the global security scenario. Asia is today central to global geopolitics for political, economic, and security reasons. The fulcrum of future growth lies in Asia. On the downside, Asia continues to experience many conflicts, stark socio-economic inequalities, and multiple rivalries. There is as yet no unified economic and security architecture in Asia which could address the emerging challenges. So in this context, let us look at what are the key factors that are affecting the global security environment and how Asia is linked with them. I would like to highlight 5 factors. Of course, there are many, but for the purpose of this talk, I have picked up 5. And 1, the role of emerging powers. 2, the maritime security and the Indian Ocean region. 3, terrorism. 4, fragile international economy. And 5th, the competition for resources. Now let's talk about the emerging economies and the multilateral institutions. As was pointed out by the keynote speaker in the morning, I think the rise of new powers, the rise of Russia, India, and China, the 3 powers that he mentioned, but I think there are many more, they are beginning to play an important role in the global international order. The key feature of the transition that is taking place today globally is this rise of these new powers. And many of these lie in Asia, or they are located in Asia. The challenge before the international community will be that in this era of change, the era of flux, the transition that the global international order is witnessing, how to make sure that this transition remains peaceful and free of conflict. Emerging economies have begun to take their well-deserved place in the international community and are today represented in relatively newer institutions like the G20 and BRICS, etc. In recent years, the world has seen the emergence of newer economic financial institutions like the BRICS New Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Now, emerging powers are represented here, but they will play a critical role, and it is expected that they would bring to the table a new model of financial and economic governance. Now, that is the expectation. And they will also complement the role that the international institutions, the well-established institutions like the World Bank and the IMF are playing. We are also now approaching the 70th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, and it is going to be celebrated in a few weeks' time. Now, this provides an occasion for the international community and the world leaders to take stock of the emerging challenges and sincerely reflect on the urgent need for reform of the UN, particularly the United Nations Security Council, to make it more broad-based, representative, and suitable for addressing the 21st century challenges of security and development. While on the one hand, we have the challenge of reforming and strengthening the various multilateral institutions, at the same time, there is also a need to enhance the effectiveness of the regional institutions in the interest of security, stability, economic development, and poverty eradication. And that's where the role of emerging powers comes in. Now let me go to the second factor, that is of the Indian Ocean. Now, generally speaking, maritime security has become an important dimension of national security. The Indian Ocean, the world's third largest ocean, is critical to global security, the security of international trade and commerce, energy, and for the development of Indian Ocean regional states situated in Asia and Africa. Maritime security today has many facets, including piracy, terrorism, safety of the sea lanes of communication, freedom of navigation, development of exclusive economic zones, maritime pollution, maritime disputes, and so on. Since the occurrence of tsunami in 2004, which battered many countries of the Indian Ocean region, there has been an increasingly useful cooperation among the navies of the region on the issues of HADR. In the recent past, attention has also been focused on the need to develop an oceans economy or a blue economy. India and Sri Lanka, the two maritime neighbors, are closely cooperating with each other on maritime issues. Well, these are positive developments, but we are also seeing many worrisome trends in the Indian Ocean region, like the emergence of old and new rivalries and the militarization of the region. Historically, the Indian Ocean region has been an arena of great games amongst global powers over a long period of history. The situation is no different today. Global competition often spills over into regional rivalries. Several major powers are beginning to vie for influence in the Indian Ocean region. And there's another trend, that is of Indian and Pacific Oceans being increasingly seen as one geostrategic concept. Now, there is a lot of debate on this, whether it is good or it is not so good, bad, what impact it will have. But the overall scenario is that with so many powers vying for influence, the tensions in the region have arisen. So there is an urgent need to keep the region stable and peaceful. And both India and Sri Lanka can appreciate this. The emergence of Indian Ocean Regional Organization, IORA, and similarly the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium are developments of great potential. The 6 pillars of IORA's work focus inter alia on maritime security, trade and investment, blue economy, and cultural linkages, etc. IONS has also become a useful platform for the navies to conduct a dialogue on maritime security. But I would also like to add to this list the annual GAL dialogue in Sri Lanka, which has emerged as an international platform for regular exchange of views on maritime security issues. India, due to its size and location, with over 7,000 kilometers of coastline and a long maritime history, is central to the Indian Ocean. Naturally, it pays great attention to the developments in this region because the developments in the region are closely linked with our own security. The Prime Minister's visit to Indian Ocean countries, Sri Lanka, Seychelles, and Mauritius earlier this year have highlighted the importance of Indian Ocean in India's foreign policy. India is interested in developing multifaceted maritime cooperation with Indian Ocean rim countries in bilateral and multilateral fora and has taken several initiatives in this regard. The ongoing cooperation between India, Sri Lanka, and Maldives in the trilateral format is something which is a great initiative and has great potential. We would like to expand this to include some other countries as well. Now let me shift attention to terrorism, about which former President Hamid Karzai spoke so eloquently. Everyone realizes that terrorism remains a major challenge of our times to international peace and security as well as national security. While international attention has been focused on terrorism, unfortunately, scores of terrorist groups have emerged in different parts of Asia. Following the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the impact of terrorism has been global, but Asia has been particularly impacted. The scale of terrorist threat has unfortunately increased in the recent times. Today, terrorism is taking on a new hue and color. The geographical spread of terrorist groups has increased tremendously. New groups feeding into long-standing rivalries and instabilities have arisen. Sectarianism is claiming innocent lives on a daily basis. Terrorist groups have formed networks which are often invisible. They are looking to capturing territory and establishing proto-states. Modern information and communication technologies are being used by terrorists and their groups to enhance their spread and reach. Self-radicalization among the youth, which has become easy on account of these technologies, is a major concern. Groups like the Islamic State have begun to make terrorism look like a fashionable pursuit. Young minds are being radicalized through slick propaganda, glossy magazines, and through a clever use of social media. The phenomena of foreign fighters, that is, the young people fighting from far-flung regions, coming from far-flung regions and fighting alongside the ISIS, has taken the world by surprise. While these groups indulge in horrific brutalities, they also project themselves as brands in the typical corporate fashion and style. Terror and crime have been enmeshed with each other. The invisible part of the internet, popularly known as the dark web, is said to constitute nearly 99% of cyberspace, which is invisible and is populated with terrorist groups and organized crime syndicates. Cyberspace, brings with it the feature of deniability, has given a fillip to terrorist groups to recruit, train, and convert new cadres. While all this is happening, we must be careful in not ignoring the good old-fashioned terrorist methodologies while talking about the new kind of terrorism typified by the ISIS. The phenomena of state-sponsored terrorism is very much alive, and it was mentioned by President Karzai in the morning. Cross-border infiltration remains the method of choice. States are also entering into new realms as they begin to sponsor terrorism in cyberspace. The international community has sought to broaden cooperation on counterterrorism. Some positive results are visible, but the overall outcome has been mixed. Regrettably, the international community has not yet been able to adopt a unified approach on how to deal with terrorism. The draft Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism remains elusive because of the inability of the international community to generate a consensus on basic issues like the definition of terrorism. Lack of unified approach, unfortunately, has weakened the collective fight against terrorism, and that's how we see a lot of non-state actors, etc., have come up, and new methods and territories are being captured by the terrorists. Now, let me draw your attention to the fourth point, that is the fragile international economy. As the developments of the last few weeks show, the global economy is once again experiencing turbulence. There is nervousness about the impact of the slowdown of the Chinese economy, the crash of stock markets, the sharp drop in the currency values of some countries. These developments have raised the specter of financial instability. Financial crises have political and security connotations as well. Asia has reasons to be cautious as it had badly experienced during the 1997 Asian financial crisis and was also affected during the 2008 financial crisis. It must be noted that the 2007-8 financial crisis, which originated in the developed countries and not in some weak developing countries, led to the distribution of power, redistribution of the power in the world. We have to wait and see how the current volatility in global markets will lead to a wider crisis, whether it will or it will not, and what impact it will have on global power distribution. And Asia will be central to this because a lot of economic growth is taking place in Asia. Now, I come to my final moment of this analysis, that is about concerning the resources. The trend in global and regional security that I would like to highlight is that the growing crisis of resources. With the looming threat of climate change, food, water, and energy issues are going to dominate the international agenda for a long time to come as the world population continues to grow. Asia, with a population of over 3 billion, is particularly vulnerable to the impact of climate variability and its effect on agriculture and water resources. Island states and countries with coastlines will be susceptible to sea level rise and soil erosion. This is already happening. The forthcoming conference of the parties, the 20th conference in Paris, will be deliberating on a climate agreement post 2020. The process of negotiations has been long drawn and its success is not yet certain. We must ensure in Paris that the principle of common but differentiated responsibility is respected and the developing countries are helped with finance and technology. Unfortunately, most of the developed countries have not been able to meet the mitigation targets to which they had agreed. Yeah. The developed countries will have to take up ambitious targets and for emission reductions if the goal of keeping the global mean temperature below 2 degrees Celsius over the pre-industrial level is to be met. India, a developing country, has undertaken a series of positive initiatives, including setting the goal of 100,000 megawatt of solar power generation by 2020. BIMSTEC countries, of which Sri Lanka is a part, India is a part, can think of a closer cooperation on climate change. The launch of the SARC satellite will also help improve regional countries to deal with climate change and climate change challenge. A few words about India's recent policy initiatives. Since the new government took charge in India, there has been a reinvigoration of India's foreign policy. The Prime Minister, in his numerous visits across the globe, has identified the main directions of India's foreign policy. Greater engagement and cooperation with the neighbors is top priority for Indian foreign policy makers. The relationship with neighbors has been deepened and intensified to mutual benefit in the last 1 year. This has improved the prospect of regional cooperation for the benefit of the people. The agenda of cooperation today includes political engagement, economic development, security dialogues, defense cooperation, social and physical connectivity, maritime cooperation, and so on. And all these factors are in play today in India-Sri Lanka relations. Similarly, the engagement with extended neighborhood and great powers is also high on India's priority. India has reached out to China, Japan, South Korea, countries in West Asia, Central Asia, and so on. New initiatives of cooperation have been launched, and maritime dimension of India's foreign policy has become prominent. International cooperation on terrorism has deepened, and a new area of cooperation that has emerged in India's foreign policy is that of cybersecurity. India's foreign policy is guided by the principles of peace, cooperation, and mutual benefit. Indo-Sri Lanka relations, a few words. Sri Lanka is an extremely important Asian country. Having dealt with terrorism effectively, it has now embarked upon a new phase of development. It occupies a special place in regional groupings like SARC and BIMSTEC. Relations between India and Sri Lanka are unique. They are based upon shared historical, cultural, ethnic, and civilizational ties and extensive people-to-people interaction. The relationship is marked by close contacts at the highest levels, growing trade and investment, cooperation in the fields of development, education, culture, defense, infrastructure, as well as broad understanding on major issues of international relevance. Sri Lanka is a vital component of India's strategic periphery and India's security. India-Sri Lanka relations are a factor of peace and stability in the region. The two countries also contribute to regional development. Following the visits of President of Sri Lanka to India after his elections and Prime Minister Modi's visit, Sri Lanka-India relations are poised to take off to a much higher level, a qualitatively new level. The two countries have close defense cooperation, which is marked by service-to-service talks, cooperation and dialogue, defense industry cooperation and training. Cooperation with Sri Lanka is an integral part of India's approach to maritime security. As Sri Lanka embarks upon a new chapter in its history, India stands ready to work closely with Sri Lanka in addressing shared challenges in the security and development fields. Chairman, in conclusion, I would like to say that forces of globalization are gathering speed and intensity. Change is inevitable. It depends upon us how we adapt to the forces of change. The world has experienced multiple crises in the decade and a half of the 21st century, and more crises can be expected in the near future. The international community needs to learn how to handle the dynamic situation which produces these crises. No country can hope to face the stresses and strains of change single-handedly or alone. In Asia too, we need to expand the sphere of cooperation and take up the habit of cooperation. International cooperation based on common understanding of the nature of change is essential. Insofar as India is concerned, its intent to deepen its engagement with the neighborhood, with the extended neighborhood, and even the far-off regions is clear. India is prepared to take greater responsibility in multilateral and regional institutions. We are also ready to work with our partners like Sri Lanka in the interest of regional peace and global stability. Good relations between India and the other Asian countries will be a factor of peace in Asia. Thank you very much.